Many people have been talking about banning Hero because the character has too much RNG and is anti-competitive as a result. I'm here to basically reframe that argument in a way that'll hopefully make more sense for both the pro-ban and anti-ban sides of the argument, basically of my personal perspective, and hopefully help us to figure out what we want to do about the character going forward. So let's start by looking at Armada's video. At the beginning, he starts by saying that people who compare Hero's RNG to other RNG in the game are so far off base that it's not even worth having a conversation with them. I disagree with that, and the issue that I have with that statement is basically that the reason why people are giving these comparisons is because they're trying to ground the argument in something other than just subjectivity. Because too much RNG by itself is arbitrary, so people are going to naturally try and connect it like, oh hey, well, Peach has this much RNG, Hero has this much RNG, so it's okay, something like that. But more importantly is, I think that both sides are kind of missing what each other's trying to say. So let's do a quick thought experiment. If there's a character that has RNG on every single one of their moves, but they only do 1% more damage or 1% less damage, would that character be in talks for being banned? The answer is no, even though they have RNG on more moves than Hero. Why? Because we're actually talking about the effect that the RNG has on the outcome of a game, not necessarily just the amount of RNG. So let's reframe it real quick before we move on. The issue that the pro-ban side is having with Hero isn't the amount of RNG that he has, it's the effect his RNG has on the outcome of a game. Next, let's talk about what it means to be anti-competitive. And to do that, we need to define what competitive means. If we look up the dictionary definition, the first thing we're going to find here from Oxford is that competitive is relating to or characterized by competition. All right, so what is competition? Oxford again, the activity or condition of competing. All right, that's still not necessarily helpful, so let's try this one more time. What is competing? Competing is striving or going against one another in order to win something. So we finally have something, but it's not necessarily the definition of competing or competition that we've been talking about this entire time. So I'm going to propose a definition that I think that we'll all agree with. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. I think that in our discussion, to be competitive means that in a competition between two or more people, the more skilled person, the most skilled person is going to be the one that wins, with matchups and stages aside, naturally. So let's compare Hero to this definition. When we play against him, does the better player usually win? That's where the question mark pops up. Let's combine this with the first premise so that we have a real basis for our arguments. Does Hero's RNG affect the outcome of the game such that the better player doesn't usually win? That's the real question that we should be asking in the case of these bans. This gives us solid footing to determine what it is that we need to. Many pro-ban people have been saying things like, oh, it's not about how good he is, it's about how random he is. But without context, that doesn't really mean much. Remember, randomness by itself isn't the issue. It's the outcome that's the issue. With all of those things said, there are some things that are causing me personally to question whether or not some of Hero's moves might be bannable. Let's take Thwack for example. It's a move that has a chance that to instantly kill depending on both the opponent percentage and Hero's own percentage. And the counterplay in neutral is to shield it, of course, but it's really big. It seems that it 2 frames recoveries as well, and it lasts for 11 frames. So if you're in a situation like, let's say you're landing, you're recovering, you basically have no choice but to pray in those situations. And that doesn't really have anything to do with your skill, just not getting hit. And don't get hit off stage or don't get hit in the air isn't reasonable for any player of any character. At the same time, the just shield argument, which honestly I was a big proponent of pretty recently even, is kind of falling apart. Because as Leffen showed on Twitter, basically a Psych Up boosted Flame Slash has the ability to instantly break shields. This is a frame 6 move that is really large. I don't personally think that that's reasonable, but at the same time, I think that we can take a bit more time to look at whether or not there is some sort of counterplay. But right now, it really just seems like the only counterplay is don't get hit when heroes in Psych Up. And that's unreasonable. You can't even time it out because Psych Up only goes away after hero loses his own stock or after he hits you or your shield, which, as just mentioned, kind of dangerous. But again, just because I can't think of counterplay at the moment doesn't necessarily mean that the counterplay doesn't exist. But we can't determine if the counterplay exists if we ban hero immediately. Even if we do decide, alright, well, hero might be a little problematic, I don't think that we should fully ban him. I think we should ban some of his moves, or in the worst case scenario, the menu itself. It could come with a penalty like a stock loss or a game loss if you use a move to take a game. A move that we consider to be like, a problem. People say that, oh, well, it's too difficult not to press this or that or the other thing, but I think that's a lot of false concern because these are usually the people who are for banning hero. So they're not trying to play hero. So they don't truly care whether or not something's difficult to do. And hero mains, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you guys would probably want most of the character as opposed to none of the character. Again, though, this is all only if we're able to determine at some point hero does have problematic elements, that there is no counterplay, so on and so forth. And we have to compare this to other elements in the game that could be considered anti-competitive. So, for example, Lucario's Aura. That's not RNG whatsoever, but imagine that Lucario was a top tier with better frame data. He could absolutely be anti-competitive, and even now, I bet that some people think that their losses to Lucario were unearned because they were bodying them in neutral, quote-unquote. We need to basically compare the rate that Hero's winning at with characters like Lucario or other characters with anti-competitive elements in order to figure out, does Hero actually break this game such that the lower skilled player or an equally skilled player is winning like way more than they should? Or does this actually fall in line with the rest of the game? But at the same time, I don't think we should wait too long. We need like a testing period or something like that of like, let's say 2 months. And we have really smart people in the community like Bernard's Loop and Practical TAS who are able to actually interpret data and figure out, oh, hey, well, Hero's winning this much more than he should, or this much more than the average character in this particular way, in this particular matchup, and it needs to be done across all levels, I think, and not just the top level, because the top level can be iffier to measure. So, for example, Bayonetta is always a weird one to talk about in Smash 4, because technically speaking, Bayonetta had never really reached the threshold that, let's say, Brawl Meta Knight had. But then again, maybe that's because we were comparing her to Brawl and Meta Knight and not necessarily other characters in the game that had the ability to take a stock super early. But that's all my perspective, and not trying to sign Practical TAS or Bernard's Loop up for anything they don't want to. I just think that this could be a good idea, maybe like a 2-month period, so on and so forth. And that sort of thing would help us to at least quell the debates for now and hopefully make people happier with the decision that is made like in 2 months. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for this video. If you like this sort of content, if you like hearing sort of my perspective on these things, please be sure to like and subscribe. And of course, please leave a comment. either here or on Twitter or on Reddit. I'd love to hear what you guys think, either in terms of what I did well, what I could do better, what you agreed with, what you disagreed with, your own individual opinions, so on and so forth. But yeah, that's it for this video. So I'll see you guys around. Until next time.